She might be feeding her mind, but she's not feeding her heart. What am I saying? Hello, lovelies. My name is Kate, and welcome to A Focused Distraction, the channel where I talk about some of my personal favorite obsessions. Today, I want to talk about the book Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This book had a book cover on it at one point, but I hate reading with book covers on because, I don't know, they get all over the place and they annoy me, so I took it off and it vanished. It's gone. Here's the side of it, proof it's powerless. That's what we're going to be getting into today. If you know me in real life, you know that I am obsessed with books like this. A little bit of background on me and this book in particular. I had heard a lot about it on Book Talk. I know not the best place to admit that I've been, but we all have a dark history, and that is mine. So I heard about it on Book Talk. It wasn't necessarily as popular as I would have thought it was, but it's one that I saw repeating. I am personally super into audiobooks, so I originally listened to this book as an audiobook, loved it so much that I got the physical copy, read it again, and the second book actually came out around a month ago. So in honor of that second book coming out, I thought that I could go over my favorite points in this first book, give my personal take. I'm gonna give a disclaimer right now. This is gonna be a plot summary video. So if you're looking for something with no spoilers, then get out, you're not invited. Seriously, if you want something with no spoilers, you're in the absolute wrong place. Go read the book and then come back, or if you're okay with spoilers, stick around. I'm going to be talking about pretty much every plot point in this book. I'm also going to start by saying that there is a very good chance that this video is going to be split into two separate parts. So it's going to be two separate videos, because as I was going through the book, I have my trusty Star Wars notebook here, and I didn't take notes on this book when I originally read it. So I went back and reread the first half of the book. And in the first half of the book alone, I took 5 whole pages of notes like this. I have a lot to say, apparently. So I'm gonna split this video into 2 different parts. This is gonna be part 1, the first half of the book. We're gonna be going over the main characters that we see throughout and going over the first half of the actual plot. The second half is going to be the second half of the book that's remaining of the plot, and then my personal thoughts. So just be prepared. It's not going to go over the entire plot of the book. We're only going over the first half, but there will be a second half video, hopefully. Also, if you see me looking down and reading, it's just me reading the notes that I took on this book. Let's get started with our Unhinged recap. So I'm going to start by going over some of the main characters that are introduced in the first couple chapters. I'm going to start by saying that the first couple chapters, when I'm going to be describing them, are going to seem very info heavy, because obviously we're being introduced to the world, the characters, what's going on plot-wise. It's a lot going on. So when I go over the first little chunk here, it's going to be very much just like character, backstory. A lot's going to be going on. But in the actual book itself, I thought it was fairly well paced. I am not well paced though. So this part is not going to be well paced. So this book itself takes place in the kingdom of Ilia. We follow our main character, Peyton Gray. She's 18 years old. She has beautiful, long silver hair and just ocean blue eyes. They're absolutely gorgeous. And I sound dramatic while saying this, but every time the love interest character talks about her, that's how he sounds, except worse. And we'll get into that later. She is living in Loot, which is the slums of this kingdom. She's poor. She actually steals for a living. So she'll go around, find unsuspecting people, pickpocket them, and that's how she's able to get any source of income to feed herself and her family. A little bit of background on the kingdom itself. A couple decades ago, I think it was, there was a plague that ran through the kingdom, and people were able to get abilities or powers, basically, like superpowers from this plague. But not everyone. So some people are ordinaries, some people are elites, they call them, which are the fancy powers, you know, the water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the 4 nations. So you have the fancier powers, the more powerful powers. That's crazy. Basically, the people that are going to be typically stronger are considered the elites. Then we have the mundanes, who are people with abilities. They have them, they're there. It's people that can like see good or hear really good, or they can turn invisible. They have some sort of generic power that's like useful kind of, but like doesn't really do anything. Then you also have the ordinaries, who are people with no powers whatsoever. Peyton Gray is an ordinary, and in this world, ordinaries are basically the subjects of genocide, kingdom-wide genocide. And there's this rumor going around that the ordinaries have some sort of disease. It's being said that if you spend a lot of time around these ordinaries, then your powers are going to start diminishing. If you have kids with the ordinaries, then their powers are going to be weak, and over time, all the elite powers are going to get like disappear. And people are pretty concerned with the fact that they think that their abilities are gonna poof out of existence. I don't know. And this is a very power-hungry kingdom, so that is absolutely terrible to them. They're like, oh my god, I have to be a regular person? Because by the way, in this world, not every kingdom has this type of power. It's just this kingdom in particular. So they're really throwing a fit over the fact that they have to be regular people again, maybe. So as a way to, fix this absolutely devastating problem, the king decides, I know, we could quarantine the ordinaries? No. We could banish them? No. Let's kill them all. Kill all the ordinaries. So there is a decree going out that all ordinaries are to be killed, and anyone that helps them is going to be sent away through the Scorches, which is a desert that kind of borders their kingdom. So they have a chance to survive and make it to a neighboring kingdom, but most people die in the desert. So basically you're dooming all the people that help the ordinaries too. There's also a subplot where the Fatals, who are a different branch of elites, are also banished from the kingdom. So you have people that can control minds, read minds, or the Silencers, who come up later, who have the ability to silence the powers of the elites and the mundanes. So basically it smothers all of their powers. They're also banished from the kingdom. And somehow people don't find it weird that the only powers that are banished are the ones that can't be controlled. Peyton Gray is trying to survive her best as an ordinary in a world where she's being hunted down. And as a way to combat this decree and being hunted, she pretends to be a mundane. The power that she gives herself is a psychic. So she's able to read people. She says, I see flashes of emotion and I'm able to get glimpses of information. In reality, she's just able to kind of tell what's going on in a situation and kind of give something somewhat generic back. Again, we're going to get into her powers a little bit later. And this was a power taught to her by her father. We also meet Adina, or A, as Peyton calls her, who is her best friend. They live together in what they call the fort, which is kind of just like a back alleyway in the slums. Adina is a mundane, and she is a seamstress. Peyton will steal fabric from carts, and Adina will use them to make clothes and will sell those clothes. She has maybe the most bubbly personality of anyone in this book, and I absolutely love her because in a lot of the scenes that we see her in, she is pretty much acting how I act when I read this book, and she's directly voicing what I want to say as the reader. So to me, she is a direct insert of the entire fandom, and again, we'll get into that later. For now, we're just doing introductions. Peyton started roaming the streets when she was 13, which was 5 years ago when the book starts. She met Adina pretty soon after she started roaming the streets, so they've been together for a very long time, and they have a very sisterly bond. So the entire time, they're seen as best friends, but reality, they're kind of like adoptive sisters. They have a super close bond, and they pretty much only have each other in this world because Peyton's dad died, and Adina really doesn't have any family anyway. So they really only have each other. They have a very close relationship, and that is something seen a lot throughout this book, and especially seen within these first couple chapters. That being said, Adina has this very bubbly personality, and Peyton has a very dramatic personality. Oh my god, she doesn't shut up. I'm gonna read to you the first line of this book just to give you a glimpse of how truly dramatic this girl is. thick, hot liquid runs down my arm. Blood. It wasn't blood, by the way. It was honey from a sticky bun, but that just gives you a glimpse into like what's going on in this girl's head. You have a little bit of contrasting personality traits, which I think only brings their bond closer together as sisters. We also have Kai Azar. He is 19 years old. He's the hot one. He has his dark hair and his stormy gray eyes, which, if I'm being dramatic again, it's because that's how Peyton describes him, and we just heard how much of a drama queen she is. And it's mentioned so much. He is, rough around the edges. He likes to fight, and that's the first thing that we see him do is sparring with his half-brother, Kit, who is blonde with these green eyes. And again, we get to see a sort of contrasting things here with Kai being the rough around the edges, dark hair, dull, I don't want to say dull, but like kind of duller eyes, and Kit, who has the blonde hair, the very vibrant green eyes, and he is known as the nicer one. So you have Kai, who's rough, and Kit, who's nice. And these two are the princes of the kingdom. Now, Kit is the actual one who's in line for the throne. He's the heir. He has a very close connection with his father because of that. They bond very easily, and the whole story is just him getting ready really to be king. Kai, on the other hand, is what they call the future enforcer. So he's going to be the one who actually goes out and executes the ordinaries and escorts their either families or whoever was protecting them to the scorches. So he has kind of a bummer of a job, and because of that, he's been trained pretty much his whole life to fill this position, and he has a very strained relationship with his father, which again we can see fairly early on in the book, but it elaborates a lot on that more later. Just know though, we have Peyton, the ordinary, and Kai, the one hunting her down. What an enemies to lovers we have going on here. We also get to see a little bit of their abilities. Kit has a dual fire and water ability. We honestly don't really get to see much of that at all, but just, for general knowledge, it's there. And then we have Kai's ability, and he is able to take on the abilities of everyone around him. So he can sense an elite or a mundane ability and is able to pick it up for himself. He's not directly stealing the ability, but he's able to use whatever ability it is they have to his advantage. It's a rare ability, and it makes him super powerful. We also get a glimpse into Kit wanting to fall in line with his father's point of views and go along with what the king says about the ordinaries all being diseased. We see how Kai has a little bit of questioning, but in general is still going along with it. However, because he has a more strained relationship with his father, he's less likely to go along with him and is more ready to be a disappointment to the family. That's pretty much the characters that we meet in the first couple chapters. That's kind of all the information that's thrown at us. I know it's a lot. Sorry about that. Let's get on to the main plot itself. We start off with Peyton having nightmares. She dreams of her father's dying, and I'm not gonna lie, I can't remember when it's revealed how her father died. So I'm just gonna say it right off the bat, because if it was not important enough for me to remember the reveal, I'm gonna assume that it wasn't really that big of a reveal. So her father was killed by the king. In the middle of the night, Peyton wakes up, goes and finds him, sees the king stab a sword through his chest. She ends up running over to him, blood on her hands. He's motionless. She was absolutely terrified. There was nothing she could do to help, and she ends up running away from the crime scene, and that's when she starts living on the streets in loot. Her mother died when she was in childbirth, so she doesn't really have a mom, and at this point she has no family left. But because of how traumatic it was, like the death of her father, that's something that constantly is being brought up, the memories that she had with him, because she had a very close relationship with him, and overall his tragic death and how much that has affected her in her life. Of course, after that very traumatic memory, she goes to rob some people because the girl's got to eat. She finds a boy in the marketplace buying a bunch of leather, and she decides, ooh, he's buying things? My man must have money. So she robs him, and she finds a note in his pocket saying that whoever he's writing to, we need to meet up at her old address, the house that she used to live in before she ran away to go live on the streets. So obviously that's a bit concerning, right? Maybe we should look into that. She thought the same thing and then proceeded to forget about it because she needed to go rob some other people. Wow, what a queen. At this point in time, we also get to see a bit of the Imperials, who are pretty much the guards of this kingdom. They are the ones making sure things are in order, protecting people, but they kind of have a power complex because they think they're all that, but they're really not. Kind of like an alpha male podcaster. She sees a little boy getting beat up by an Imperial, reminds her of how she got beaten up by Imperials for stealing all the time. She actually runs into an Imperial herself, who immediately questions her abilities. What are you able to do? And I actually want to read a bit of this section. This is on page 22. It's our first experience seeing her demonstrate her abilities. And I think this is a really good way to show not only her dedication to survival, but her character in general. All right, so we have the actual action of her performing. I'm sensing anger and regret from you. You've just split up with your wife. Well, actually, she left you. The look of utter shock on his face brings a small smile to my lips. And if you really want me to be specific, because, well, you told me to prove it, it's because I stopped mid-sentence, squeezing my eyes shut while pressing fingers to my temple, putting on a convincing show. You cheated on her? Wait, I'm getting something else. I peek up at his face, now red with rage, as I continue rubbing my temple. You want her back, but she doesn't want you. I'm prepared for the backhand before I feel the sting of it across my face. So that's the actual demonstration of her power. I'm going to skip a couple paragraphs and go down to her actual thought process. The thin tan line on his now empty ring finger was my first clue that he was formerly married. Then there's the fact that he moved his wedding band to his other hand rather than pawning it off for money, telling me that he still cares for his ex-wife and is probably pining over her. The disheveled hair, crumpled uniform, and smell of whiskey on his breath further prove that he's obviously a single man who no longer has a wife to make him look presentable. Men would likely go extinct without women to coddle them. Is that a sexism I hear? I feel like that's a sexism, but honestly, she's kind of right. So we're going to continue. As for the part where he cheated on his wife, well, that was more so of an educated guess, based on the way he looked at me, along with the stellar reputation of the Imperials have made for themselves. Clearly, the assumption hit a nerve before he hit me. So I really like that section just because not only does it show her thought process and going through it, which I personally thought was really cool. It shows how dedicated she is to survival. You know, she isn't just coming up with some half-assed story like you would see most psychics do in the real world. She's actually going through and reading people, which I thought was really cool. Something else that I thought was really interesting was it's showing her intelligence not in a book smart way, but in a more street smart way. Fourth Wing is a book, especially if you're on Book Talk, I'm sure a lot of you have either heard about, maybe read. At the very least, probably know of its existence. So I'm just going to use a quick example with Violet Sorrengill. Violet is a very book smart character. You see a lot throughout the book. She's reciting facts. She wanted to be a scribe. She's showing intelligence in a very traditional way. You have characters like Katniss Everdeen, who is, Hunger Games main character. And this book actually has a lot of similarity to Hunger Games, so I'm gonna probably be referencing her a lot. So be ready for that. But Katniss Everdeen, definitely more of a street smart character, but you see it more with hunting knowledge and survival knowledge rather than knowledge like this of being able to get a read on people or more emotional intelligence. So I just thought it was similar enough to some forms of intelligence that we've seen, but different enough that it stood out to me in that way. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but that was just one of the things I liked about this book. In the same section, we get to hear a little bit about the trials. If only I had not closed my book. Oh no. I think it's explained best on page 23 when Peyton describes the trials. In honor of the Great Purging over 3 decades ago, the trials were created to showcase the people's supernatural abilities and bring honor to the only elite kingdom. Basically, it's the Hunger Games. It's the Hunger Games, except it hasn't been going on for as long. And also, it's not a random draw. The people pick who they want to be in the trials. It's superhero Hunger Games. Who could want anything better? Basically, the people will pick who they want to be in the trials, which are pretty much the most popular elites or mundanes in their society. They fight to the death. It's also not like a last man standing sort of thing. It's after each round of the trials, people will vote for who they liked the best, and whoever gets the most points at the end wins. It's the Hunger Games with like slightly less stakes, and it's been going on for less, and it's superheroes. It's not really a new concept, I'm not gonna lie. But even so, we get introduced to the trials during this part as well. Very brief introduction, but it's gonna be important. Who would have thought? Here's just a small detail about Peyton that's constantly referenced throughout the book. She has her father's wedding ring that she keeps around her thumb, and she likes to spin it very often. I think this is one of the first instances that we see, but it's constantly referenced throughout the book. Not super important to the plot. I just thought it was an interesting detail because it's a pretty good indication of when she's really nervous. And it's also gonna come into play when more of the romance aspects come into play. So at this point, she decides to go out robbing again because, again, girl gotta eat. She gotta eat. She can use her psychic abilities and eat in that way all enough, but that is not sustenance, okay? That is not going, she might be feeding her mind, but she's not feeding her heart. What am I saying? Not feeding her, she may be feeding her mind, but she's not feeding her heart and her body. Her mind can be sharp as ever, but she doesn't have the fuel needed to survive. What am I talking about right now? She decides to go out robbing again, and she sees in the distance this tall, handsome gentleman with a huge bag of money. Okay, she found herself a sugar daddy. So she decides that she wants to go rob him. Can we guess who this tall, mysterious, handsome stranger is? That's right, it's our other protagonist guy. She has this whole act going on where she will kind of stumble into the person. She'll put on a pretty face and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it's just a way for her to get closer to them so she can reach into their pockets. But she does this with Kai right off the bat, immediately. There is so much tension. They're just staring into each other's gorgeous eyes. And she's like, oh my God, this guy's so hot and so loaded. So she robs him. I'm sorry, I wrote this in my notes. Guess they don't have a lot of clean water on the streets because that girl is thirsty. I feel like I'm on drugs. So she robs him, wanders off with the money. There's a lot of romantic tension in the scene. I'm not gonna read any of the parts right now. Nothing super noteworthy other than the fact that they are very flirty with each other and talking about how gorgeous they look. I wish I was the hot couple. We cut back to Kai's POV. We see him being hot as ever, training without a shirt on. And we start seeing the reason that he gets sent over to be in loot in the first place. So he gets called in by his father and sent on a mission to go find an ordinary in the slums. He goes over to the slums and he finds the ordinary, which is a little girl living in a house full of mundanes who are treating her as her adopted daughter, so they're basically her family. He gets into a fight with the family. You know, we need a little action going on here because robbing is not enough. He ends up taking the girl with him while the Imperials take away the family. One thing that I don't know why I found it funny at the time was the reason that he was able to tell that someone was like, there was someone else hiding in the house was because the family left out the extra bowl of porridge. And my American is gonna be showing a lot right now because I don't know anyone that eats porridge. But when I heard porridge, my first thought was Goldilocks. I'm like, oh, we're gonna take a little Goldilocks spin. No, we're not. What was I thinking? Porridge is a regular food, but not in my brain apparently. That's a side tangent. Anyway, the family is now being escorted by the Imperials to the Scorches. He takes the little girl whose name is Abigail with him. What's supposed to happen is he's supposed to start parading the family through town to make an example out of them, be like, look, this is what happens if you help an ordinary. He's supposed to go and execute Abigail and call it a day. But because she's so young, he does not feel comfortable at all with that. So instead, he has the family escorted to the Scorches through a back route and ends up reuniting Abigail with her family once the Imperials leave, sending all of them off into the Scorches. I know this part is supposed to be seen as like a, look, he's a hero. He's helping her. He gave her a chance at survival. Even he himself says they're pretty much guaranteed to die. I'm just sending them to a different death. So I know this part's supposed to be seen as like a, oh, yay, look, he's he's not that bad. You just sent her to a worse death. Instead of having it be as quick and as painless as possible, you're sending her into a desert to either starve or die of dehydration. Is that what you consider better? But it's okay, he's trying. He might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but he's trying, okay? So I appreciate the effort. During this part too, he also gives her a little dagger, which is supposed to symbolize, look, you might be ordinary, but you are strong and you can fight for yourself, which is also gonna end up rolling over into their romance. Who would have seen that coming? At this point, from his perspective, he hasn't met Peyton yet. So we actually get to see his perspective when meeting Peyton, which is something I like about this book. I don't have a whole lot of experience with like dual POV books, but from the experience I do have, it's either two completely different stories that end up meeting up, or it's the same story and you only get to see certain sections from certain people's POVs. You'll have one section and then you'll go to the other person's POV and it picks up where that last one left off. So I like that we had some overlap. Let's get a sense on how Kai feels when he first meets Peyton. She again does her little show, and we get this. Her palm is pressed to my chest, where a thick ring hugs her thumb, and after a few seconds of my studying her while she attempts to steady herself, she heaves a shaky breath before meeting my gaze. It's like drowning in the ocean. Her eyes are the color of the shallow sea's deepest corner, a clear sky as it begins to drift into night, the subtle shade of a forget-me-not. And like the hottest flame, her eyes are blue and full of fire. Her high cheekbones lead up to equally strong, dark brows, now slightly raised as she takes me in. Her ocean eyes widen, and I watch a faint flush rise to her cheeks when she realizes how closely I'm still holding her against me. She drops her hand from my chest, and like the gentleman I am, I slide my hands from her waist with a small smile tugging at my lips. I guess the desert really did dry him out because he's just as thirsty. My first time reading that part, I genuinely laughed so much. Dude, I know it's supposed to be building romantic tension, but he kept describing her eyes like the ocean, and the only thing I heard in the back of my head was Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish. This is my impression of Kai looking into Peyton's eyes. Look at those ocean eyes, those ocean eyes. They get their first meeting, pretty much plays out exactly how Peyton described it. They're flirting the whole time, and as soon as she leaves, he realizes that she robbed him, and she's like, oh my god, I can't believe she did that, but why is it kind of hot though? She leaves and he starts walking away and immediately gets jumped by a group of mundanes who see the huge pouch of money that he's carrying out in the open and decide it'd be a good idea to rob him. We get a little more action sequence because he's such an icon, a fighting icon. In the middle of this fight, all of a sudden his power stops and it feels like he can't breathe and it's getting harder for him to move, and that's when we realize that a silencer has come into play. Oh, dang it, I forgot to mention. When they're flirting, she consistently calls him a cocky bastard. That's not really important either. She just keeps calling him that, and I think it's really funny. He feels like he can't breathe, he can't move, he feels completely powerless, motionless, like he can't fight anymore. That's when our little girly Peyton comes in to save the day. At this point, she does not know that Kai is the prince, and she just sees someone getting smothered by some sort of power, not able to move, and she's reminded of when her father died and how she was powerless to help him. So that trauma kind of fuels her fire into fighting the silencer. She beats the crap out of the silencer, like a queen, and saves Kai. At this point, he's rescued and everyone starts bowing to him, and only then does she realize, God damn it, I saved the prince trying to kill me. But he's hot though. We get another little scene of them together where he pins her against the wall after she tries to run away, which I guess is supposed to be sexy, but feels a little more predatory. You do you, boo. He decides to interrogate her on her abilities. She gives him a fake reading, is able to tell by how dull his shoes were compared to how shiny they used to be, that he was in the scorches, and that there were less guards there than normal, so it must mean that he wanted it to be quiet. He was getting an ordinary. It was a whole ordeal. It was hot. I loved it. After that, he lets her go, but there was definitely the bringing back up of romantic tension. At this point, too, they have not even really met. She mentioned her name at the very end of this interaction, but at this point, they have seen each other twice. Oh my god. Get a room, guys. Like, can you calm down? But right off the bat, they're like immediately, oh my God, he's so hot. And I'm really hot because my room is 82 degrees and I'm sweating. After Peyton manages to save Kai, she leaves, and at this point on, they start calling her the Silver Savior because of her silver hair and the fact that she saved the prince. So she's becoming a little local celebrity in Loot. Because of all of this attention, she is now picked to be a member of the trial. Oh no! There's also a little scene within this section where she's telling Adina about the battle. I just need to read this part because this is pretty much why I love Adina so much. Adina at first, rightfully so, is very worried, like, oh my God, did he figure out that you're an ordinary? Because that would be tragic. He's gonna have to kill you. And she's like, no, I managed to trick him with my little psychic abilities. And then, of course, Adina's follow-up question after finding out that her friend's life was potentially in danger is, okay, but is he really as handsome as everyone says he is? I give her a flat look that I doubt she can see, but I know she can sense. That is the question you're dying to ask after everything we just talked about? That wasn't an answer, she sings songs. I lie down on the rough carpet, stifling a groan with a scratchy blanket. Choosing to keep my mouth shut gives Adina all the answers she needs. She squeals, and this time I stifle her with a blanket. That's who I'm talking about. That was me reading the scene. I'm like, but was he hot though? And then Adina asked the question, was he hot though? So basically Adina's my best friend. She's not real, but she's my best friend now. That's why I love Adina, because she is a fangirl at heart. She is really bringing to the table how I feel when reading, okay? And she deserves more love. Peyton gets picked to be in the trials. Oh no, especially considering she doesn't actually have an ability. The whole point of the trials is that you fight with your elite ability, which she doesn't have. So she's like, basically I'm being sent here to die. The king knew this when he approved me going to the trials, so she's pissed about having to go there, rightfully so. At this point, we cut back to Kai, who is torturing the silencer who Peyton beat up. She beat the crap out of him, they took him back to the castle, and now Kai is tasked with torturing him in hopes of getting some sort of information about him. This is also when we get our first clue onto the resistance, which is mentioned. The king mentions that maybe he was a resistance member, although that's all the real information that we're given about the resistance at this point. We also get to meet Jax, who is 15 years old and the adoptive brother of Kit and Kai. He has the ability to teleport, and his parents died in a shipwreck. I might be making this up, but I think his parents were close to, like, advisors to the king or close to the king in some way, which is why they took him in, because I'm assuming that they wouldn't just take in some random kid off a shipwreck. And he's so sweet and I love him so much. He's so innocent. I love him. He's one of my top up there, but Adina will always be my number one. We also get to meet Blair. She has lilac hair, which to me says, I'm not like other girls, but watch out. I can be dangerous. I hate her. She has telekinesis. She's super powerful and is one of the top telekinesis people, I guess. And we also get to meet Sadie, who I think is her friend. Sadie is a cloner, so she's able to create multiple clones of herself. Blair is kind of a brat and kind of the worst. She has a tendency to want to cling to the princes because she wants to be special. She for sure talks like a Kardashian. Just the Cali girl vibes on this one. She for sure is talking shit on pretty much everyone. Sadie doesn't really have a personality. She's just kind of like there. She's with Blair. She's there. She's gonna be one of the contestants, so that's why we're introduced to her. But like, she's kind of irrelevant. We don't care. We also get to meet a couple of the other people that Peyton is going to be traveling there with, because they have people that are both high elites, you know, actively at the castle. The prince is involved. And then we also have the people from the slums. So she gets escorted with them. We get a bit of flashback on her dad teaching her psychic ability. Now, he was a healer and one of the only healers in the slum, and ended up teaching her not only how to be a psychic, but also some very basic medical training. We get a very Hunger Games-esque goodbye between her and A. They have like a poster put up on the wall that has all the names of the people that are gonna be in the trials, and her name is last. And then an Imperial comes up to her and she's like, oh, are you Peyton Gray? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, You got 5 minutes and it started 4 minutes ago to go say goodbye. So she sprints over to A, is giving her very teary, heartfelt goodbye. I'll never forget you, A. It's literally, it's like Hunger Games. She's like, oh, like this isn't a forever goodbye. Like we're gonna see each other again. And then immediately gets ripped away. And I'm like, where's Gail? And that's when she officially gets escorted. And we also get to meet some of her contestants that are going along with her. So we have Ace, he is an illusionist, and I think I hate him more than Blair, which is saying something. He just has the cockiest personality. I'm gonna win. What, you're a psychic? You should watch out. I'm a threat. Man, you make people act like they're on shrooms. Like, be real. We have Hera, she is quiet. She has the power of turning invisible. I think they call it a veil. She's also kind of irrelevant, so we're gonna forget about her. They get to the palace and they meet Lenny, who is gonna be Peyton's Imperial, who basically takes her around the castle, is escorting her places because obviously she's from the dirty little streets. She's used to living in garbage and now she's living in a castle, so Lenny's like, I'll have to show you the ropes here. Surprisingly, we love Lenny. I know they talked all the time about how awful the Imperials are, but Lenny was just such a sweetheart. He was so understanding of her whole situation, had a good sense of humor, was very kind. He escorts her to her room. She's immediately awestruck by how absolutely gorgeous it is. And right after she's done ogling over her room, they lock her in there for 2 days and she starts freaking out. They do this because they want the contestants to be isolated before everything starts, but she says that it's probably an intimidation tactic, trying to get them all nervous and hyped up for the trials. This whole time she's freaking out. She's like, oh my God, like I can't go out, I can't talk to people. I'm like, imagine having to do that for 4 months. Girl would not have lived through COVID. She was such a baby. I'm like, oh, boo-hoo. You have to stay in your gorgeous castle bedroom, okay? Drama queen. Finally, she's told to get ready for dinner 2 days later. She has her first meeting with Kit. Their first meeting was a little awkward. She had just gotten out of the bath and was trying to figure out what to wear. So she opens her bedroom door to go all in the hallway for Lenny to come help her. Because she's used to wearing the same green sweater vest with the pockets that Adina made for her. And now she has to wear real fancy clothes. Opens the door and standing in front of her is Kit. And she was not ready for this, especially seeing as she's only wearing a bathrobe. He mentions that, oh, I gotta keep tabs on all of the pretty girls that saved my little brother. Okay. He's low-key flirting with her in like a more subtle way. Like Kai was flirting with her in a very out there way, but Kit was low-key about it. We now are at dinner at this point. They get to dinner, they have these super awkward introductions. It kind of hurt me to read. This whole time Kai is just staring at Peyton. He's like, oh my God, she's here. She just doesn't care about him. She's like ignoring him and just trying to talk to other people. He ends up trying to get her attention because he is a little baby that can't go 5 seconds without someone noticing him. We're gonna talk about this page because this is during their dinner scene. This is what, page 93. At this point, Peyton is too busy looking around at everything and just like awestruck that she's not eating. And Kai takes notice to this and he says, that won't do. Just because we are competing against each other doesn't mean I want to beat her by default due to her starving to death. So I stab a piece of turkey with my fork, reach across the table and plop it onto her plate. Her eyes snap to mine, her face a cross between annoyance and shock. Do you like beans? I ask casually, and when she doesn't answer, I pile them onto her plate anyway. Well, I guess I'll find out. I lean over the table, adding potatoes to the growing pile of food to her plate. As I murmur, are you gonna make me spoon feed you too, or can you handle feeding yourself? With that, I smile at her in a way that will undoubtedly make her want to throw her beans and punch my face. He feeds her! As stupid as that scene is, it's got me blushing. They flirt in front of everyone. They're sitting at the dinner table with not only the other contestants, but Kit, who's not allowed to compete because he's the future king. They don't want anything bad happening to him. And the king and queen. They're sitting there with the whole royal family and the other contestants and outwardly flirting in front of everyone. After dinner's over, all of the contestants have to go back to their bedroom. Yeah, okay. We have a couple pages to go over here. We're gonna start on page 95. It's time for them to leave and he sees Lenny come over to escort Peyton back to her room because that's literally his job. And he decides he doesn't like that. I watch as a young, redheaded guard saunters up to Peyton with a grin, and suddenly I'm stepping between them before I can stop myself. I'll take it from here. He looks at me, confused. Sir, I am to escort. I'm aware, and I'm perfectly capable of making sure she gets to her room. Don't you agree? He just had to step in. They barely know each other, by the way. Right after this scene, right after that, that jealousy scene was a tease for what's coming next. Because this is a romantasy book, they have to have a knife to the throat scene. Need I say more? I will say more. If you are not a fan of stereotypes, don't read this book. Because there are so many stereotypes just like this one. The knife to a throat scene is a classic, right? It's a rite of passage for a romantasy book. This scene, I was giggling in my bed at 2 a.m. when I was reading this. This is not a normal knife to the throat scene. Things escalate to the point where they are both holding knives to each other's throat. I watch her gaze trail over my shoulder to the door I'm currently blocking. She opens her mouth to say something, drawing my attention to the healing split in her bottom lip. On impulse, I can't seem to ignore. My fingers catch her chin, lift her face up towards mine. She's too stunned to move, and I take advantage of it. I would have thought that you could avoid a direct hit like this. Guess you're not as skilled of a fighter as I thought. And I shrug and tilt her head toward the light, casually examining the angry cut in her lip. Oh, but she's no longer standing there, stunned, still, and silent. In one swift movement, she grabbed my wrist from under her chin, twisted around with a jerk, sending a shooting pain up in my arm. Then she's gripping my shirt and shoving me against the wall. Her free hand finds the dagger strapped at my hip and slips it out, settling the sharp blade against my throat. That's the correct way to respond to that situation. Just take this from like a real world outside perspective. She has met this man like 3 times at most. And although she thinks he's hot, blocking her doorway so she can't get through and like messing with her lip, good on her. Good on her. They have a super dramatic knife to throat and throat scene, and the chapter ends with, this girl might be the death of me, literally. Like, yeah, I kind of hope she is, but he's hot, so like, not really. After this, we get a training sequence. The 2 main things that happen within this training sequence is they throw knives at each other because this is a romantasy book and we have to throw knives. That's a huge thing. And there's also a scene where Kai starts braiding Peyton's hair. But it was cute, I'm not gonna lie. I was blushing. Obviously it was just an excuse to like touch her. It's weird if you think about it for too much, okay? Just don't think about it. But then we get the interviews. And this is where it really started feeling like the Hunger Games to me. If the trials itself were not Hunger Games-esque enough, we have the interview process, which is even more Hunger Games. If you remember in the Hunger Games, they have each of the people from each of the districts have to go on to the television show and give an interview. Supposed to basically, like show them off so that people will sponsor them and give them gifts when they're actually in the games. The way that this interview process works, it's pretty much the same thing of you're showing off your personality plus your abilities, your powers, and people will then vote for who they want to win. We have Kit coming back to and walking with Peyton as they're going to the interviews. He's again flirting with her a little bit. We get to see for the first time how Peyton really feels about Kit, and she describes that how whenever she looks into his eyes, she sees the eyes of the king, who killed her father, so obviously there's a little bit of hate there, and she just can't bring herself to look in Kit's eyes. We definitely get to see the flirting aspects going on with him, as well as more flirting on Kai's part because he just can't shut up. We also meet Andy, who is Kai and Kit's cousin. She is also participating in the games. She has the ability to turn into animals, and she doesn't play as big of a role in this. She's not seen all that much, so we're gonna forget she exists for now. The whole interview process was fairly uneventful. There is one thing though to note in the interview process, and it happens on page 123, and this is during our best girl Peyton's interview. She has to do her thing of like showing off her psychic abilities. She gives random people readings, and then she does her actual interview part where I think the girl's name is Tiala, is asking her questions about like living in the slums. And there's one question that she asks everyone, which is, what do you expect to get out of the games? And everyone is supposed to say, I'm expecting to honor my kingdom, my family, and myself. It's kind of going along with like Ilya's motto or something. Then they ask her the question, So we're gonna start here. This is page 123. All right, Peyton, last question. What do you expect to get out of the trials? My mouth opens, intending to spew out the practice motto of the purging trials like everyone else had, like I'm supposed to do. But when my eyes lock on the glass box above me, lock on the current and expecting king, words fall out of my mouth before I can bite my tongue. The wrong words. Survival. I expect to survive this. And I know that's supposed to be her like badass moment, but I was like, wow, she ate with that. Well, she tried to, but she's from the slums, so they don't have a lot of food. Nothing super notable happens in this next small chunk. We do meet Gail, who works in the kitchens. She is a mother figure to Kai and Kit. Kai's mother is the queen, and Kit's mother died giving birth to him. There's that little shared trauma between him and Peyton. Small parallel, but it's still there and it's mentioned. But Gail pretty much serves as a mother figure to them, and Kai takes Peyton to the kitchens where she's introduced to Gail. She's already meeting the mom, basically. Dang, their relationship is going quick. So we have a little bit more of a training sequence going on here. Difference, though, is that Kai and Peyton start sparring with each other. It was hot. That's another romantic cliche, though, of having the sparring scene. So good that we checked that one off the box. Let's see. We have knives to throat, throwing knives, and sparring, all within like 30 pages. Good. We have to make sure we cover all of our bases here. Then from there, we have talk of the first ball. There's 3 different trials. Before each of them, they have a big ball or a banquet as a way to kind of welcome the contestants and everyone there to watch. All of the girls need to have dresses for the ball, and because we live in a sexist society, they all have to have male dates. What if I wanted to go with a girl, you may ask? I don't know, they didn't bring that up in this book. Peyton starts kind of worrying a little bit because she has neither. We already know, our boy Kai, he wants to ask Peyton to the dance. But that sucks for him because she's going with Kit. I kind of love that. At this point, she's still not like nuts about Kit. He still very much reminds her of the king who killed her dad and, you know, trauma. But she knows that going with Kit will be good for her image. It'll be a way to show that a slummer and a royal can get along together. It can show someone super powerful and super powerless can get along together. It'll be a whole symbol. I'll do it. I feel so bad for Kit because Kit, I think, genuinely likes her, which is kind of weird because he knows that his brother likes her. It's adding to the whole love triangle aspect. Now all we have is the problem of having a dress. She's got the date, she needs a dress. There is also a tradition where the women will wear some shade of green to these balls. That's because green is Ilya's kingdom. Peyton's talking to her maid, Ellie, about finding a dress and what she has to do for that, and she's like, wait a minute, I know a seamstress, Adina, who's back in Loot. She would get to live in the castle and she would be Peyton's personal seamstress. At this point, she had completely forgotten about Adina. Justice to my girl Adina, but she feels really bad about it. She's like, oh my god, I can't believe I forgot my best friend. It's been like 2 weeks. As soon as she got to the castle, not one thought went to Adina. And so she decides that A is gonna be her personal seamstress. Now, before they actually go and get A, we have some more Kai and Peyton scenes. Peyton is getting ready for bed one night when she hears a knock at her door. It's our boy Kai. And he's like, you need to learn, like, follow me. And she's like, what do you mean, follow you? And she does, because she's a dumbass hoe. He ends up bringing her to his actual bedroom, not the bedroom that he's staying in for the trials, but his real bedroom. This is just a small detail, but I thought it was really funny. We see books like strewn across his desk. We see strategy books, combat books, and poetry, because he has a soft side. Wow, that is a not so subtle way to show that has a soft side. And he's also dramatic, because all people that read poetry are dramatic in some way. I should know, I was in a poetry club in high school. So she comes up to his room and he's like, I can't have you stepping all over my brother's toes while you're dancing with him. So I guess I just have to teach you to dance. Seeing them dance together was absolutely adorable. Peyton was not having it at all at first until Kai forced her. They also play this little question and answer game. If Peyton agrees to dance with Kai, she gets to ask him a question and he has to answer. So they go back and forth with this little question and answer thing. It's really just a way for them to get to know each other. It gives the characters themselves some form of connection, and I'm a sucker for stupid romance, so I thought it was really cute. Is it stupid? Yes. Did I love it? Also yes. The one question that Peyton asks is, do you wish it was you to be king? And he says, nar, babes, nar, I would never, babes. And that's exactly how he says it in that voice. Now we finally go get Adina. Yay! She's like super hyped to be there, and we get this little scene of Adina going over like, okay, well, what shade of green do we want to pick for you? And Peyton goes, actually, I have another color in mind. Ooh. We cut to the ball scene. Everyone shows up in their traditional green dresses, different shades. Peyton shows up in a completely silver dress with a high slit going up her thigh, showing her silver dagger that used to be her father's that she keeps on her at all times. Right off the bat, she is making a statement, being like, look, I'm the silver savior. This is why you chose me. Also, I'm really hot. She's there with Kit, so we have a couple scenes of them dancing, and Peyton's still not being able to look into his eyes, which drives me crazy. Anyway, we have another Kai being jealous scene. This is on page, 168. We see Kit dancing with Peyton, which obviously Kai does not like. My eyes wander across the dance floor, landing on my brother and the girl in his arms. I'm not wearing green, but I feel it nonetheless. Envy claws at me as I watch them step in time to the very waltz I led Peyton through only last night. She looks elegant, enticing, entrancing. What the hell is wrong with me? I can tell that he reads poetry, and that's not necessarily a good thing. They're having a good time at the ball, and eventually Kai does make his way over to Peyton. They start dancing together. It's cute. They're flirting as per usual, because the only time we ever see them talk to each other, it's when they're flirting. But in the middle of their dancing and flirting, there is an explosion. There are people screaming, and Peyton sees the boy from Loot who had the leathers. So she knows something's up, because remember, that boy also had the note in his pocket saying to meet at her old house. So she knows that this is something way bigger going on. She just doesn't really know what. And Kai is there to protect her. Peyton, being the stubborn little hoe that she is like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm here to help you. So of course, Kai does the sensible thing and throws her over his shoulder and drags her out of there. At this point too, she realizes like the people attacking them are using homemade bombs and aren't fighting with any abilities, which leads her to believe that it's ordinaries who are the ones fighting. And she's now really confused. She's like, why is a group of ordinaries attacking elites at a ball, and they seem completely unprepared, like something big is going on here. She ends up getting taken to this little safe room where she meets up with Kit. This is our first time really seeing Kit has, a different side other than his like more kind and kingly, I'll say, side to him. We see that he wants to go with Kai to help fight and protect his people, which is only natural. I feel like he's getting ready to rule a kingdom, so to me it makes sense. How can you lead if you're not there with your people? However, I think Peyton makes a good point when she realizes what's going on with him and says to envy him is to envy a murderer. Now she's making me confused, because at first I was on his side and now I'm like, wait, am I? Darn you, Peyton. She ends up having a little talk with Kit. She knows that Kit, likes to flirt with her a little bit, so she's like, maybe I can use it to my advantage. I'll try to calm him down and get any sort of information on what's going on right now, because she is completely in the dark. He ends up telling her that there is a resistance forming. It's been going on for a couple of years now, that are made up of ordinaries and fatals. And they're working to stop the genocide that's been going on, which for some reason people are like, oh my God, how could they do that? How could they want to live? I was on Kit's side until he started talking about this. I'm not even gonna lie. Peyton asks what Kit thinks of the resistance, and he has been trained by his father. At this point, he's pretty much completely brainwashed and is like, well, I think it's selfish that they do this to the kingdom. It's for the good of the kingdom. Are you telling me that them wanting to just be alive is selfish? After this whole ordeal, Kit has to leave to go into meetings to talk about the whole ordeal that just happened, and Peyton ends up going back into the ballroom and finds Kai slumped over and injured. She ends up going over to him to see what's wrong. He's flirting with her because he doesn't know when to stop, and she ends up finding a knife in his back. Like, can you please calm down for 1 second? She ends up pulling the knife out of his back. He's able to heal himself by taking a healer's ability that was nearby. But she knows, after hearing about this resistance, she's gotta go join them. This wouldn't be a romantasy if we didn't have some form of resistance or rebellion, okay? Hunger Games 2. We are going to cut to the actual trial. So this happens pretty much the day after. The king decides they're all fine. They can go on with it anyway. And he doesn't want to make it known that there's a resistance in the first place. We start with Kai's POV and we find out what the actual trial is. They are tossed in the middle of the woods. They were drugged to get there. So questionable ethics number 1. Drugging your own son. I don't judge, but I am judging. They have leather straps on their arms and they have a week that they have to spend in the woods where they have to try to collect as many bands as possible. So you have to try to keep your own band and find other contestants and take theirs by presumably attacking them. Whoever has the most bands by the end of this is going to be declared the winner and is going to get more points when it comes to the voting polls. So we see Kai climbing a tree despite his fear of heights, something that's briefly touched on, but like not really. It is indicated though that his father used to make him climb trees all the time to help him get over his fear. Bad parent alert, but we're gonna get into that more later. He decides to head over to a nearby creek that he sees when he gets attacked by Braxton. It has come to my attention that I have not mentioned Braxton so far, and that's because he's also kind of irrelevant. Just know that most of the contestants that are taking place in these trials I don't care about them. They're kind of irrelevant. And Braxton is one of them. They end up getting into a fight. We have a little fight scene. Kai gets burned by a fire that he made nearby when Braxton attacks him, but he ends up flipping Braxton over into the fire. He gets really burned. Kai is able to get his band and he runs off. Now, at this point, we are going to cut to Peyton, who is also waking up and finding herself in the woods. She, for the most part, is just trying to trek and find herself some water when she stumbles upon a pond where Kit's body is floating dead. And then she turns around and sees a little her. So clearly it's an illusion made by Ace. She realizes that it's Ace's illusions and they have a whole fight sequence. It's a lot harder for her because she's fighting against someone who actually has pretty strong abilities and is making her question her whole reality. Despite this, she manages to get a good stab in on his leg, but not before he stabs her in the stomach. She is not doing well. She doesn't lose her band, but she doesn't get Ace's either. He ends up running off after she stabs him, and she continues trying to make her way over to water, but it's very clear that she is not doing too hot. She's kind of in the process of dying. She ends up finding her way over to the creek that Kai is staying at, and every time they meet, they kind of are toying back and forth with each other, but this time she just tells him, leave. She has a bow and arrow at this point. She had been making quivers along the way, and that's how she was able to stab Ace. She stabbed him with one of her arrows, and she holds the bow over to Kai and is like, if you don't leave, I'm going to shoot you. And he's like, you wouldn't dare. And he's trying to joke around with her before realizing that oh crap, she's actually straight up dying. So this is when Peyton is in the process of dying when she first meets up with Kai. This is page 212 and 213. There's a couple sections I'd like to read here because they bring my heart joy. So we have Kai first realizing that something is wrong with her when she starts to shake a lot. She's lowering her weapon and she ends up aiming the arrow at the ground near his feet instead of aiming at him. So he says, Gray, what happened? He's stepping slowly towards me, but I can't keep my hold on the bow any longer. For reasons I can't explain, I'm aiming at the ground instead of him, releasing my grip on the string and letting the arrow fly into the dirt at his feet before the bow slips from my sweaty hand. I can barely hear Kai's shout through the ringing in my ears. Gray! I don't remember hitting the ground. My face connects with the packed earth, but I barely feel it. My whole body's on fire, hardly breathing as I burn from inside out. Peyton, hey, look at me. Rough hands are gripping the sides of my face, forcing my eyes to flutter open. They feel cold against my fevered skin, now slick with sweat, and concern is written all over the beautiful face hovering above me. I've never seen him so worried, so full of emotion. His cool mask is cracked, shattered, splintered into a million pieces as he lifts my head off the ground, pulling me toward him and searching my face with wide gray eyes. Normally, he calls her Gray, which is her last name, and never calls her Peyton, never calls her Pay. This is supposed to be a very in-depth moment for him, showing how much he actually really does care about her. Because despite all this back and forth, she's not convinced that he actually likes her. This is the first moment that we see his cool mask crack. He, at this point, is totally freaking out over the fact that she very well might die. And in his panic, he ends up trying to look around for water, something to clean out her wound. Conveniently, it looks like Braxton dropped a healing salve that has the power to heal the most fatal wounds. Am I up there in the distance? I think I see it. It's plot convenience. So he ends up using all of the healing salve to save Peyton's life. She thanks him by doing the natural thing of slapping him in the face when she wakes up. What a queen. We love her. At this point, Peyton's wound is still not doing fantastic. He managed to stop the bleeding, but he still has to stitch her up. So to distract her, he ends up asking Peyton about, her life, what life was like living in Loot, her past, her father. So she ends up telling him what it was like living in the slums for her, the death of her father, how much that affected her. And to me, this is supposed to be a bit of a trust building thing. It was still really cute. I liked it. And she also at this point mentions that the dagger that she carries around is her father's, which I'm pretty sure I mentioned earlier. So this is when he is still trying to heal up Peyton, stitching her together, and she's asking questions about why he was willing to go to such lengths to save her. Because at this point in her mind, they're still very much, they're enemies at this point. She's an ordinary, even though he doesn't know that. He's the enforcer, future enforcer. They're contestants. She's still very unclear on why he was willing to save her in the first place. This is when he is talking about using her actual name. Because most of the time, he calls her Gray. But when she was dying, he called her Peyton and Pay, which is a name that he'd never used for her before. So this is him kind of going into depth about that as well. And in that moment, I realized that I'd wanted to say it, wanted to hear it from my lips. Realized that if she died, I would have never again get to look into those blue eyes and utter those two syllables that had been a constant in my mind. So I said her name again and again. I finally let myself do it, let the last piece of attachment to her lock into place. Just saying her name felt intimate, personal somehow. And now I will forever want her name on my lips and rolling off my tongue until I'm drunk on the taste and sound of it. What the hell is wrong with me? Her eyes find mine, sparkling like a body of water in the firelight. Why are you doing this? Her gaze tells me that there's no escaping the question this time, though I'm not even sure I have an answer for her myself. All I know is that I have this urge to protect her, be with her, tease her, touch her. It's terrifying. Do you know what else was terrifying? That whole paragraph. At this point, Kai has pretty much healed Peyton, and Peyton has done her best to try to heal Kai a little bit, because remember, he saw that burn on his arm. She is the daughter of a healer, so she is able to create simple herb mixtures to help him out with that. So they decide to work together. As she is putting on her herb mixture, Kai opens up to her about living in the castle and what it was like for him growing up, and how he never felt like his dad was really a dad to him. The king viewed him mostly as a soldier, as the future enforcer, which I don't think I've gotten on this rant yet, so I'm gonna do it right now. They keep calling Kai the future enforcer because he's gonna be the one going out and executing all of the ordinaries when it's time. But to my knowledge, there's no current enforcer, and also he's already the one executing all the ordinaries, so where's the future part coming in? He's already doing that job. He talks to Peyton about his father was a lot closer to Kit, and they would do, lessons together, meetings together. Meanwhile, his father taught him how to torture. His father would actually torture him as a way to get him to learn. And that was definitely a big thing for them, because it showed Kai really opening up to Peyton, showing the more traumatic parts of his past. And it showed how much Peyton actually really does care for him, because she had a pretty reasonably distraught reaction to that. She's like, what? I'm sorry. What? Realistically, what did we expect from the king who commits genocide? They have this little scene. It's not even a big scene. It's not an important scene. Nothing really happens, but oh my god, it was so cute. They start squashing mosquitoes on each other's face. So, just a little slap on the face, and they're being all cute. And Peyton starts laughing because she's like, this whole thing is so absurd, and she's still partially delusional. I don't know. Girl is still not getting enough water, clearly. And she starts laughing really loud, and then he starts laughing together, and they just have this whole little scene where he's talking about how like infectious her laugh is, and they're just laughing together, and it was so wholesome and a nice break from the absolutely terrible flirting that they go through sometimes that I love anyway. After they have their cute little laughing scene, they get attacked by wolves. They end up fighting the wolves together. Kai at first is not keen on the idea of Peyton joining him in this battle, but she's like, you said we're partners, so basically I'm fighting with you, like a girl boss. So they end up fighting together. Kai does most of the work though, I'm not gonna lie, and in my notes I have written, it's okay, these wolves have nothing on Kai because he's the real alpha. I get secondhand embarrassment for myself. They work together, they kill all the wolves, all is well. Now they have a lot of food, hip hip hooray. I just sat there for a couple seconds just wondering what on earth. I just wrote, I love this quote in 241. Didn't write down what it was. I think it's this. So she looks back at me too quickly, and I hope I've wiped the look of wanting from my face fast enough. She's so stunning, yet so stubbornly oblivious to how the sunset behind her dulls in comparison to the vibrance that is her. Shut up. Shut up. They have another dance scene. They have another little dance scene in the middle of the woods with nothing going on after they get attacked by wolves, because that's the natural progression of things. You have a cute mosquito scene, attacked by wolves, dancing. They play their favorite game of question and answer while dancing, and it's really cute. They're flirting as usual when Kai mentions that, I notice everything you do, Peyton. She's like, wow, even this? And she holds up the band that she took from, or that he took from Braxton. We also have this absolutely adorable favorite color scene on page 246. What's your favorite color? My eyes snap to hers. What? I nearly choke on my laughter. Your favorite color? What is it? For once, I almost step on her toes out of shock and sheer wonder. Of all the things you could ask me, you asked me what my favorite color is? I can't keep the smile from spreading across my face. She blows a strand of hair from her eyes in annoyance. I feel like I don't know many things about you, so I figured I'd start with the basics. An amused sigh, I'm letting you off the hook with an easy question, so don't disappoint. What's your favorite color? I spin her if only to give myself more time to think. I'd never thought about what my favorite color was before. It never seemed important. Not until I looked into a pair of ocean blue eyes and realized that perhaps drowning was a beautiful thing. Not until I looked into a pair of fiery blue eyes and realized that perhaps burning was a painless thing. Not until I looked into a pair of sky blue eyes and realized that perhaps falling was a peaceful thing. I never thought about what my favorite color was before because I hadn't seen one that was worthy of the title. Until now, that is. Blue. I say my voice low. Wow, what a poet. After that, they ruin the cute mood with talks of their dads and how much Peyton misses hers and how much Kai does not like his. We love the daddy issues. So they're still continuing their dance. They dance for like a long time, apparently. Kai says, I never cease to annoy you, huh? I watch her face while pulling her impossibly closer. What about now? Is this the exception? She swallows and dips her head, not offering me an answer. I smile slightly as I try to get her to speak, a problem I've never had to deal with before. Pay? Still no answer. My fingers catch her chin, gently guiding her gaze to meet mine. There is confusion etched all over her face as she lets out a shaky laugh. I am annoyed that I'm not finding this annoying. My hands tightens around her waist, like it might catch on fire from the feel of her. I'm embarrassed by how much this one girl engrosses me, afraid of how affected I am, yet it makes me feel equally weak and wonderful. Alarmed, yet alive. He is so down bad for her. He's so in love. A female voice interrupts them. And for now, that is going to be the end of part 1 of my recap. We are officially halfway through the book. Sorry that it got so much darker in my room. I started recording at sunset, and then not only was there a thunderstorm that hit while I was recording, but also it turned to nighttime. So we're just gonna have terrible lighting for half of this. Sorry. I know that I have maybe not have been as nice to the characters in certain situations regarding certain things they said because they make me want to vomit, but I still am absolutely obsessed with this type of romance. I love it so much. I know I'm talking shit on it, but I think it's so cute. And I definitely recommend that you read this book if you're still interested in reading this book after hearing me talk about it for God knows how long. If you made it this far in the video, round of applause to you because I'm the one recording and saying all of this and I barely made it this far. If you made it this far though, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you liked the video, make sure to actually like it in digital format and leave a like below. If you have any thoughts on this book, make sure to leave them in the comments below. Or if you have any book suggestions of terrible books along these lines, please leave them in the comments below. If you want to stay tuned for more videos like this, then make sure to subscribe. I have a whole list of absolutely terrible books that I am obsessed with that aren't actually terrible, but I could talk about for hours. So if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. And yeah, I really appreciate you making it this far with me. I hope you make it even farther if I can make it that far myself. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next one, maybe.